Thank you, sir. And it looks like we lost about half the crowd, so I will take that personally.
We're being competed against with the other session is what it turns out.
Oh, I thought it was the cookies and the Mountain Dew. Okay. First of all, my name is Robert Holder. I work at the Applied Physics Lab down at Johns Hopkins in Maryland, and just would like to thank Proteus for having me. Would also like to acknowledge my co-author who couldn't make it up here today. In many ways, he's been the real visionary of this. I'm just merely the computer science type, and so he's the one who's typically really on the ground, seeing how a lot of these systems work and trying to abstractly tell me about these things, and I try to collect them and put it into a format that we can, sell to people, or mostly our upper management, so we continue to get funding for this work. Would like to also thank the speakers that we've had the chance to hear from today. In many ways, a lot of the talks that I've seen today have showed me a lot about how this stuff may really be applicable, and hopefully you guys will also see that and also tell me how it can be applicable and where we can go with this type of research. So what we've been doing for this past about year and a half or so, we've been doing kind of a mind experiment. And we've said to ourselves, if we were in a situation like this, we're all in this room here, and we're listening to each other talk and collaborating, things like that, if we remove the constraints, say, of physics and time and space, what type of collaboration might that look at? And there are sponsors that are interested in exploring this idea, and so this is how we jump to the idea of virtual environments. We can move to the next slide. So to give a little context, that was kind of the million-dollar question. To give a little context of how we approach this problem, we started with a couple concrete scenarios, which I'll walk you through, and then we came to some we thought interesting conclusion about what we would need to do in order to fully integrate the use of virtual environments for use in collaborations in general, and specifically in the context of DoD collaborations. So a little bit of background then. We started with some research back in about 2005, 2006 with a concept called dynamic collaborative action teams. And the basic concept is how do you bring together ad hoc teams to solve specific problems quickly and efficiently. And then we moved to resource brokers as a component of that framework, and we'll go into more detail about both of those. Just a show of hands, I guess I can plagiarize this man here. Raise your left hand if you know what a virtual environment is. Raise your right if you've used it. Okay, that's pretty good. So we're talking mostly Second Life, I'm assuming, for most people. What other virtual environments have we experienced?
Call of Duty 4.
Call of Duty 4, okay.
Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, that's a big one, obviously. So we'll see virtual environments for the use of, obviously, gaming. So we'll see a lot of World of Warcrafts and things like that. We put together a prototype, and it's very underwhelming, but it was a proof of concept of some of the, for one thing, we were starting almost from scratch. In my particular group, we knew about virtual environments, so we talked about it kind of mentally in theory, but we actually want to get our hands a little bit dirty. And so we actually put together a little prototype demonstrating some of the concepts of integrating our DCAT and RB technology into a virtual environment. We did about 3 different small demos of that, so I'll show you some screenshots of that. I actually have it on my laptop, so if anyone cares to see the 2-minute version of that, in real time, then I can do that as well. Finally, really where I would like, hoping to get feedback from Proteus, was we took a look at his experience doing search the literature. We came up with some ideas of what would need to happen, what things need to change as far as our paradigm of the physical-based environments moving to the virtual environment, what would have to change in order to affect that. And next steps is kind of where we see it going from here. So I think we'll back up one. So just to get a quick background again, this is the Dynamic Collaboration Action Team. So this is where we started as far as this concrete context to start forming the mind experiment that we've been going through. The intuitive, it's a lot of pretty pictures, but it really comes down to something along the lines of this. If you wanted to have a conference, then a gentleman like Paul here, he would know he has a lot of experience with it. He knows how to put together a conference. He knows that you need speakers, you need tables, chairs, PowerPoint presentations. He has a pattern. He has a pattern of how to make a conference happen. And you can have patterns on how to, for example, deal with a flood or chemical, biological attack, anthrax attack, things like that. And then inside of these patterns, you have parameters that you input, and these determine the exact requirements that you're going to need in order to put a team together that can solve a particular problem. So this is a framework that collaborators at APL put together over the courses of FY05 and FY06, and defined this framework, and these are just basically pictures of it. The idea that a request comes in, and we have some idea of what we need. We take these patterns and we from there generate what we need as far as people, resources, time, space, things like that. And the real key is that we have these repositories that define what our people's capabilities are, their time availability, resource availability, things like that. And so that becomes just a basic resource allocation problem that we've seen. The key that is more interesting is that we know that a lot of the time this information isn't up to date. So if I say that a particular expert is available to help with this ad hoc DCAT team, that expert may not actually be available, or it may turn out that expert is not available later on. You know, he may become ill or something like that. And so then we have to revamp our team. And so depending on the particular capabilities of this expert or resource that we're depending on, that obviously then impacts how we have to reconfigure the team depending on the scope of the requirements that this particular resource covered. And so then we have to go through this iterative process in order to finally come up with, at the end, a team that covers all the requirements for a particular role that we have to, a particular team that we have to form. So I think that's enough about that. We can go to the next slide. Besides just coming up with this paper, this framework, this idea of what we need to happen, we put together a prototype. And this is just a Java-based application written on top of a Jena reasoning engine that comes up with solutions to certain patterns. So here we have a ChemBio attack. We have certain other parameters we've thrown in here, and we can press the magic button. And what we get back is this team consisting of resources that are required or that are recommended set of specific resources that we should request in order to respond to this ChemBio attack for this particular scenario. So we can move on from there. So assuming that we can take this previous technology and we can actually make this work, we can put a team together. I can put some numbers in and get a list of names, resources, and things back. Then, you know, that's all fine and good. So the next step in this mental exercise was, okay, well, we still have this issue of having to fit all these people in the same time, in the same place, with all these resources and things like that. And obviously that's one major issue. It would be nice if we could all, if I could be home, you know, in Maryland where it's a little bit warmer, and I could still be standing here presenting to you. I mean, so we can reduce that constraint. That's helpful. We also had issues with display, so visualization of complex information. We saw earlier in the presentation this morning that we can have some very complicated representation of data. So we can be very dynamic, it can be multidimensional, and it's difficult to render these things in a way that's meaningful to us as humans. And so this is limited to a two-dimensional display, and we can have a three-dimensional physical model, which is nice at times, but also limiting. For example, you may picture if you're having a house built, and the architect gives you a 3D model of the house, and so you can pick up the house and you can look at it, and that's nice, that's better than seeing it on the screen. But you still have the constraint that, for example, you can kind of look inside and see, is that wall a little bit crooked? Do I really want that much space? It's tough to actually see inside and get at it in any way in the physical realm. So you might imagine that if we had some sort of virtual environment, then maybe we could become very small, or this model could become very big, and we could go inside and look around and get a better perspective of what's actually going on. This relates to this part here. And then finally, training and simulation. One of the things that we've seen with the virtual environments, and this is already going on in the DoD in terms of training and simulation, we can set up scenarios, and it's very quick to do that in virtual environments. And we have a greater ability to do replay. So in the real world, if you want to look at how somebody performed in a certain scenario, you can set up a bunch of video cameras, and you can replay, and you can do debriefing and stuff like that. With virtual environments, you have the ability to actually see data of what actually went on. You can flip it around, blow it up, slow it down, things like that, and it's something that automatically happens just by the nature of virtual environments. Let's go to the next one here. So here are just some screenshots. Most of you, I guess, have either heard about it or seen this. So this is a couple pictures I just stole from a colleague. One thing just do want to mention is that you can have these virtual meeting spaces, and they can be very dynamic and easily adapted. So here we have a couple people talking here. We have a screen up here. You might imagine that if a need came up, well, we want another screen, we want some other model imported here. In the real world, we can't just bring in another screen, just like that. I mean, we could, but you have to, haul it up the stairs, through the hall, through the door, have some just kind of delay. But virtual worlds is something that you can kind of render right away and have it available for use. This just represents the idea that you can do things in the virtual environment that you can't do in the real world. So here we have a person flying around, and this type of thing is very common in the Second Life flying is the big thing everyone likes to do. But one thing that colleague at APL, that's Michael Pafford, he likes the vision of you have this big logistical map, and you have different things on the map, and you want to focus on a specific region of the map. And instead of having a laser pointer and you kind of point it out, you press a button, everyone kind of levitates up and flies over to this spot on the map. It looks good, it's cute and all that stuff, but research shows that this really does help with comprehension and understanding of the information you're trying to convey. And really that's where I think the value of virtual environments comes in. So, Tim talks about, gaming and, other things that virtual environments are used for. But, research does show that if you enhance the bandwidth of the amount of communication that you are sending and receiving, then it does enhance the small team cohesion. So there's research that it says small team cohesion as a function of the communication style. So you don't send an email with regards to emotional or message that can easily be misconstrued. You don't break up with your girlfriend over the phone, things like that. You don't. So these virtual environments give us enhancements over things like the email, the virtual environments, the video teleconferencing and things like that. Okay, so let's move on. So this is just another idea of once we start having these virtual environments, if everyone has these virtual environments that we're working in, we have the ability, and this is a screenshot from a Croquet virtual world. And Croquet, well, I'll get more to what Croquet is a little later, but it's a standard development kit for developing your own virtual worlds. And so you can have your own virtual world, and you can have a colleague in another virtual world. You can open up a portal between the two, and you can jump through, and you can start working together on that type of thing. Yes. Oh, anytime you have a question, please.
Incredibly unexpected that the federal government would have a consortium for virtual environments. And I encourage everyone to go on their website. It's the Federal Virtual Environment Consortium. I've attended both of their meetings so far, their annual meetings. At the meeting, at the briefing room, the auditorium, if you will, on the Second Life NOAA site, there's a very interesting dynamic that shows up here that I was waiting to see if it's going to you folks' attention. When you're in a real environment like this, you have breaks and you can talk and you can meet and you can shake hands and you can exchange. But it's not proper behavior to have a discussion across two tables while a presenter is speaking. What I found in both meetings that was very interesting was I made contacts real time through the messaging capability at the NOAA site in Second Life while I was watching and listening to the presentation. And they had a mechanism where you could ask a question and a moderator in Second Life forwarded it. And it's amazing. We saw a presentation by two academicians in London, real-time with real-time video. But the interaction between the virtual audience members while watching and absorbing what was going on from the real environment, I thought was for me, was a totally unexpected wrinkle. So I was making contacts and having conversations about the content in virtual real time without interrupting the real time presentation as I put it down.
There's
It's a channel of communication
Yes.
in the virtual environment that I did not expect.
There's a gentleman named David Alberts, and he's presented at the ICERTS conference several times, and he talks about the future of C2. And so he says that we're going to get away from, well, we're starting to do that, we'll get away from the idea of a central point of knowledge and that instruction is filtering down. We're going to have what's called edge organizations, where you have these small ad hoc teams that are making decisions, and they filter around. And in order to have these effective teams, these smaller teams, you have to have the ability many times to have simultaneous conversations. And if you ever had, on the phone while your, daughter is whispering in your ear about something, it's not an easy thing. But with these virtual environments, one thing you're able to do is have, like you said, these chats, and anyone who's, done IMing, it's pretty easy to flip through the conversations as, you see fit. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that one of the things we talk about is the idea of informal collaboration. So small teams are more cohesive when they have kind of an informal relationship with each other. So kind of like if you're in an academic setting and you can talk to each other casually going down the hall, you're more likely to collaborate, because collaborations don't come, okay, here, let's collaborate. It really comes from informal conversations, like, oh, that's interesting, you know, these ad hoc conversations come about. And so in the real world, there's a conversation going on that you might be interested in. You have no way of knowing about it if you're, you know, around the hall on the other side of the bathroom or something like that. In the virtual environments, you can have ways of being notified when there's relevant conversations going on that perhaps you should be a part of. Or perhaps people in the conversation might say, oh, well, let's go and find, you know, such and such. You should join the conversation. It's not, let's go by his office. Oh, he's not there. Let's talk anyway. It's more, we'll send him an instant message, and he'll join the conversation. So the ability to have this digital underlay, what might be previously considered just a physical world, is, you know, is pretty powerful. So please continue to have conversation, you know, across 2 desks and stuff like that.
How do you get that jump through that whole thing?
Oh, okay. The analog might be if you've ever used desktop sharing software, where, so I had a conference call the other day, and the person running the conference call would share the desktop, and you could all see what's going on the desktop, this one person's desktop. This might be analogous where you could have your own virtual environment, you're doing work, but you're able to create a portal to someone else's virtual environment, virtual world. So this is not like one big virtual environment. There's many different virtual environments, if you like, depending on, well, Second Life, I guess, is one big one, but things like Croquet, every person can have their own for their own purposes, and they could be a small LAN of virtual environment, or of computers representing a virtual environment. So here, you can jump from one to the other, depending on the particular context. Does that address your question? Okay.
There's one, if I might,
Yeah.
there's just recently been in labs, and some, I'm forgetting who the other engineers said was, moved an avatar between 2 separate virtual worlds,
Mm-hmm.
which is the first, Microsoft thing. Now, the bling and the close didn't go, but the rest of the avatar went. That's the first time we've gone between 2 entirely separate hosted virtual environments with the same
Right.
avatar.
So there's a number of initiatives out there that are looking at the, thank you. There's a number of initiatives out there looking at the interoperability of virtual environments, and there's 4 I can think of on top of my head, but, you know, Second Life is, you know, very heavily involved in one of them. Okay, cool. Yes.
Yeah, in your experience or working with this, to what extent have you found people who already know one another in the physical world, who are trying to build collaborative teams to do something? Does that matter, or does it matter best when entering a virtual world? In other words, if I enter a virtual world, I know it's you, and I've worked with you before, and I know it's your business. How consequential is that?
Okay. Yeah, it's about the same consequence, I would say, as if it happened in the physical world. Now, our research really hasn't gotten to that point where we can really ascertain that. That's the short answer to your question, that we don't know. Our work with the resource broker in virtual environments just kind of says that if you're available in the virtual world, then we can find you and kind of pull you in.
Just from my own experience, we've been goofing off, working in Second Life for many years now, and we host a whole bunch of numbers of LAN parties at my office when we bring people up for training. LAN parties is the geek speak for a first-person shooter. Everybody jumps on, and long story short, the training that we do that ends up in a LAN party, the stuff I've done in Second Life, to get back to the previous presentation about polycentric, is that, at least from my own personal experience, even when I know Joe is in the network with me, that's Joe right there, I work with him, even if we're on the same team, I am more likely to collaborate with my immediate avatar on mission. So for example, Call of Duty is a first-person shooter, and when you die, you respawn, you come back alive somewhere else on the playing board, and you have the little color hats, so you know red versus blue. If I respawn and I'm moving through a building and I see another team member, first thing I do is chat, hey, let's move to we stand a better chance working together and staying alive. You watch, noon to 9, I'll watch noon to 3, and if we can find a third guy, he'll watch our back. And so the same thing with Second Life, we've had things built in Second Life. I've gone looking for specific skill sets in Second Life regarding to missions that I need accomplished. I need my school to be replicated from my physical world in Second Life. And so it was my collaborative experience in Second Life and in other immersive environments is primarily mission-based. I have a mission. Stay alive to move through this building. I have a mission. Replicate my physical school in Second Life. And even when I know there are people in Second Life, it is easier for me to find somebody else and say, you watch my back, let's go. Or can you build a school for me, yes or no, and away you go. So it's actually, I've discovered that it's more the mission and the reasons why I'm in that environment drive who I talk to and when, more than any previous experience, previous knowledge or previous relationship with people. So that's just me.
But social conventions carry over to a large degree.
Oh, they do. They're still very much the whole person.
Don't get
Yes.
too close to
Let's
Yeah,
go on to
the follow-up, which is what open is that I had the impression when you started that the intent of the virtual environments that you were looking at was to enable physical cooperation, ultimately teams that would build something or perform some action in the world.
Actually, our goal is to enable virtual collaborations. We started our basic, well, let's actually, it'll be clear if we go to the next slide. What we're doing is, okay, so what we're doing is the idea is that we have a tool that allows us to do physical collaborations. And now we're asking ourselves the mind experiment, well, what happens if we try to do this in a physical realm? What kind of different things we need to do to get teams together in a physical realm using this tool, what kind of adaptations you have to do with the tool, things like that. Okay, I'll go through this briefly. This is the PRECIS environment. That stands for planning, reacting, execution, and constraint satisfaction. It's a environment that's used for an AI for testing planning algorithms. And so there's a large paper on this, a lot of details for different scenarios about, what is the win rate, what's doing what, how quickly can you get from one city to another. And so we borrowed this and we built a virtual environment scenario around it. Basically, the main points are that you have a couple countries here. We don't deal with country C in this scenario, but we have country Y and Pacifica, which are political adversaries with regards to water rights in the Pacific Rim area here. Country X is friendly to the United States. Country W is divided into North and South regions, and we have the U.S. over here. Go to the next slide. Then we go from here, and we built the idea, okay, so what if we wanted to have these collaborative teams? And so we have one that's based upon how to deal with this hurricane that just hit the Pacific Rim. Remember, this is the Pacific Rim, so it's a hurricane hidden here. And so now we're going to work together. These countries and the United States are going to work together to somehow resolve, the catastrophe that we have down over there. And we're also going to have, and currently, an ongoing political negotiation in this other virtual environment down here. And this is the type of scenario that's going to drive a lot of the questions that we came about later. Just to show, let's see, what do we have? So this is the physical environment here. And so we have, Alice has a avatar, USA, we call it Alice. Yolanda has a dual there as well. We have Wes and Wayne that act as one avatar just because their geographical interests are similar enough that you don't need more than one avatar. That's a whole nother line of discussion, but we'll just say that these two are represented by William here. And then in this political negotiation virtual world, we have Wayne and Wes as separate political entities, Yolanda and Alice and Paul. So this is to negotiate these water issues that Country Y and Pacifica are dealing with. This is to negotiate the hurricane that just hit the Pacific Rim. And other thing to note is that we have a kind of a secure connection here between Yolanda and the rest of the countries. They have logistics tools, and all that information is aggregated into one virtual logistics tool that anyone in the virtual world can access. And here it's not labeled, but this is a an economic, political, simulation tool that's run out of the U.S. that's made available to the virtual environment. Okay, let's cache that for now. Let's move over to the next one. So we did a lot of this mind experiment thing. We actually want to get our hands a little bit dirty. We did a number of simulation, or not simulation, but a number of prototypes. We started with Second Life, and we built something that worked in Second Life. The problem with that is that if we want to sell this to interested sponsors, you're going to find that because Second Life is based in California at Linden Labs, you're not going to be able to have any kind of sensitive or classified information on it because, once again, it's going outside the wall to some other party. So ideally what you would like is the ability to host your own virtual world behind your own firewall, under your own control. And we looked at several, and we ended up settling on Croquet. Croquet is a virtual environment standard software development kit. And it's based upon Smalltalk, and which is in turn, Squeak is based on top of Smalltalk, and Croquet is based on top of Squeak. So Smalltalk, you all know the one of the original object-oriented languages. Squeak is a graphical user interface on top of Smalltalk. And so they leverage that to give you virtual environment components like little worlds and portals and windows and things like that. And so we built one of those behind our firewall, and we showed that we could import a real-world resource, this resource broker, into the virtual environment. And we showed that we could have multiple of these worlds, and we could move avatars between it. But what was really interesting to us is that we could take this virtual broker, put it in this virtual world, and unlike in a situation in a physical world where sensing of computers sensing the state of the world is very difficult. So we had some magical resource broker robot that was going to help us put together a team and could look around the room and see who's here and who's not here. I mean, that's very difficult. In the virtual environment, because it's all digital, it's very easy for a resource broker to say, okay, well, this person's here, this person's already here, this resource is already here, so I won't make you explicitly tell me that they're here. I'll recognize that they're here, add that to the equation for coming up with a solution to the DCAT team that you'd like me to solve. And close the next slide. And so we'll kind of zip through these. This is the picture of the virtual environment interface of our resource broker. You can go to the next one. We imported into the world. The details of that are, not hard, but probably not terribly interesting. But we've got into the world. Go to the next slide. And so over on the other side of the world, we have our snowman. And snowman has the ability. This is something built into Croquet. We can, well, you can't see from there, but you can access another world. So you can say, well, what's in my land? What's local? This world is local to my land. Give me a portal to it. Portal opens up. You can kind of see what's going on. Snowman can come through the portal, and you can see the portal is still here. And here's the imported resource broker. You can go to the next slide. And so now, if we assume that the snowman has some interesting information about what types of things are needed in order to form this DCAT team, they can work together on this resource broker here, and you can see the results over here. So this is all done in a virtual environment with the backing of a real-world resource broker that sits on some machine somewhere. Okay. All right, so that all being done, the mental exercise continued, and we try to come up with, okay, what's the difficulties in trying to take this concept and make it kind of broadly useful? And so we came up with about 7, and I guess we'll talk briefly about them. Let's go to the next one here. So first off, the idea, if this thing works, then we're going to get a lot of input from a lot of different disparate places. So there's probably collaborators that you would like to work with, but it's difficult to do over the phone or over the internet and things like that. And if you could really have them virtually in a world with you, then that might make them more useful to you. Now, once you start increasing this access, then by inherently you're going to also increase the different types of issues you're going to have to deal with, whether it be terminology, personalities, things like that. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say about that. So different disciplines, different cultures, different things like that. So I don't think this is specific to virtual worlds, but we think that if virtual worlds really do take off, then this just become an issue that will become exacerbated. Let's go to the next one here. This is something that kind of came up. So virtual worlds have this abstraction. You're in this virtual world. You're kind of completely encapsulated from the real world. And so you don't really think about the fact that things are backed by something that's tangible in the real world. It's kind of like if you're looking at a web page, you really don't think about the server behind it. But in reality, you can have a situation in which something in the real world is supporting things in the virtual world. And so if you're just looking directly from a virtual world perspective, then what happens is you might see actions that don't quite work. I mean, if you're doing some of the logistics tool, then you might experience something going strange with your political economics, tool. And so the ability for the resource broker to take these types of things into account is not difficult, but the way to do it is something that we really, the preferred way to do it is something that we haven't established yet. Let's go to the next one. Security and privacy, this is going to be the big thing. Let's keep in mind that, out here, if we need to have a private conversation, I can take someone into the hall, close the door, and we kind of whisper to each other's ear and come back in and no one's any wiser. Virtual environment, that's a lot different because, remember, all this information ultimately is going to some server that's being rendered somewhere. And so someone hacks a server, somebody has some way of subverting the software. The issue of privacy and secrecy changes quite a bit. Just because we're in this world where everything is digital and you can't rely on things like a door because a door is virtual. It's not going to have the same properties in the physical environment, except as far as the software is enforcing those properties. Hopefully that was, at least intuitively, makes sense. We talked about this a little bit earlier. How are we going to get resources and avatars in between virtual worlds when different people are doing different things? And let's go to the next one again. Here was kind of interesting problem. So let's say you're in the virtual world and you have this complicated model, this dynamic four-dimensional model with things moving around that really expresses the idea that you're trying to convey. For someone not in the virtual world, how do you take that and give it back to them? I mean, it's not something you can just print out. So this idea of moving resources in between the physical and the virtual world is going to be I think a large issue as well. And I think that's.
What do you mean by resources in that context? Can you give a concrete example? Quite sure.
Okay. If you go back to maybe the presentation this morning, Dr. Canto showed all the glyphs and graphs connecting to each other and stuff like that. And one thing we can see on the screen, he can kind of morph in, zoom out, turn it around. We can really see what's going on. Now, if you were to print that out, it would just look like flat lines. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next one then. I don't want to say too much about this. This is really kind of next find this guy. But well, actually, let me just. So if don't have time for this, let's go to the next one. This is just the idea that you can have. You're gonna once you start having these dynamic collaboration action teams, you're gonna have lots of dynamic situations. So information is going to change, your team is going to change, people can get called away. In general, the pace of your collaborations is going to increase. And that's not specific to virtual environments, that's just really specific to the fact that we're moving in a faster and faster paced world. And so a virtual environment, resource broker, and pulling together resources from virtual environments is going to have to be able to quickly come up with new solutions to previous questions. But also, if we did it ideally, we would be able to come up with solutions that are versatile or easily adapted. So if you have one person that does everything, maybe that's a good solution as far as a resource broker goes, but maybe it'd be better to have many people doing lots of different things. You can kind of plug and play different solutions as people have to change their paradigms. Okay, I think that's about it. So just the next steps, we just want to sell this to DoD, things like that.
Don't we all? Yes.
Yes, and the rest of the things, how do we use virtual environments for usability, data manipulation? My coworker, he is real excited about virtual environments. He envisions the idea of you go to a computer, you pick up a Word document, and you throw it at another computer, and it pops up and somehow it's translated to something that a Mac can read. So I think this idea of sharing information and data manipulation from a Minority Report type of perspective is something that he's real excited about. And just the next one is just really virtual environments are, you can go to the next slide. The virtual environments, I really think, personally, are just an interim solution. I really don't think that everyone's going to want to download a Second Life client, jump into it, and be running around as avatars. But I think what we really want is the ability to combine virtual environments with real environments. And this is really where a lot of these issues that we've discussed are going to really come into play. And so all you Star Wars fans out there, I'm sure, will recognize the idea of we're actually in a room and we have the holograms of people here, and there's really no distinction between whether someone is there or not, just the true integration of the physical and the virtual. And I think I will stop there. So, thank you.